another series on the passionate professional. Today, I have a very special friend and an incredible pioneer in the content marketing at some of the top television stations, television out there, especially CBS. And I want to welcome to the class tonight is Myles. And Myles is a forward-thinking content executive with a stellar track record of building, optimizing, and leading teams in high-profile, brand-sensitive, rapid-paced environments to drive both scale and audience engagement. I know a lot of you that are graduating from school right now in communications, in entertainment, you're going to want to hear this. Mike has an incredible record in deep production, logistics, management, workflow, technical experience across all TV, film, streaming, events, marketing, live broadcasts, digital, social, tech, music, concerts, video games, I'm laughing, podcasts, animation, and VR productions. So here's the thing, guys. If any of you are in any of this looking to find your niche, today, Mike will tell you how that works. And he has a passion for all of it, but creating great content and memorable experiences. One thing I love about Mike is that he loves building projects with people all around him to create impeccable success. And he loves feeding insatiable curiosity, which I hope you all have today on how to always make things better. Welcome, Myles, to the table. How are you, my friend?
That guy you just described sounds crazy.
Well, that's why I love him, right?
I never paused long enough to look back at the craziness that I have done. So thank you for just mirroring that back. And yeah, I've just it's funny. The older I've gotten, the more I've realized I think I'm at my best when I
Wait, stop, Mike. Mike, stop. You froze again.
Oh no.
Yeah,
it did.
So, Mike, I know, a little weird hearing your whole background, right?
Yes, yeah. But I've always said that I think I'm at my best when I'm biting off a little bit more than I can chew. And so hearing you read that back, it's definitely, and I'm doing that now with my life. I've just I keep saying yes to projects because I just have this, I don't know, never-ending need of curiosity and to just dive in with everything. But I love it. I'm at my best when I'm doing that.
I love that. So, Mike, let's go back through the time tunnel here, because you didn't get to be the content producer at CBS just showing up at their door. So let's go back to a time. What were you doing in your room or outside, getting lost in the time and flow of your life before your mom called you for dinner? What did you remember your passion to be at that time?
You know, my story for the life that I'm living and the career that I have chosen, I have thought long and hard about this. I can trace it back, and I'm old, so I'm going to date myself, but I can trace it back to 1977. I was 11 years old, and I went to go see Star Wars, and it blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. And I wanted to see it again, so I did, and again and again. And then I didn't have any money, so I would get up on Saturday mornings and use my friend's dad's lawnmower to mow lawns around my neighborhood to get money to ride my bike back to the theater to sit there and catch the first showing, and then sneak into the bathroom and then stay all afternoon to watch it again and again. And I probably saw it about 100 times. And I look back on those days, and I think what it was I didn't know what I was seeing, but I wanted to be part of the industry that made people feel the way Star Wars made me feel. And I can trace everything back to that summer of Star Wars. And that's honestly, it moved me in ways I couldn't even comprehend. And it was just such cool storytelling, and it was spectacle, and it was sci-fi, and it was amazing. I'm like, I don't even know what this is. And I just kind of kept going from there.
That is so cool. So was that like formidable in your mind when you went to college, when you were coming out of college? Was that still very foremost, or did you take a different turn down there?
I didn't know what I wanted to do. My parents just kept pleading with me to stay in school. I was a horrible student. I got straight D's most of the time. They tried sending me to a private school. I got D's. They were upset because they were spending a bunch of money. And it wasn't until in college I wanted to work at the college radio station, and they said, and by the way, all through those formative years, I was going to the movies, and I was always drawn back to movies and stories. I didn't know why. I didn't even try to intellectualize it, but I look back on it like I loved. If I didn't have anything to do, I was at the movies. But I wanted to work at the college radio station when I was in college, and they said I had to take introduction to broadcasting in order to be able to work at the college radio station. And I'm like, all right, that's cool, whatever. So I signed up for the class, and it was like the first class I can recall where I got an A, and I didn't even try. And
Oh
it
my
just felt, and
God.
I loved everything that was being talked about. And I was like, this is fascinating to me. And I still didn't know why. And I think that that's important when you're younger. You don't have to know why. Like, if you're drawn to it, just keep going. Like, life has a way of, like, if it's not meant for you, you'll kind of know, like, it won't feel right. You'll feel out of sync. But if it is right for you, like, start getting A's. I signed up for other broadcast classes, A's, production classes, video, audio, A's, lighting, A. I'm like, I don't know what's happening, but like, I can't wait to get into these classrooms. Like, never in my life before have I experienced this. I can't wait to hang out with these people. I can't wait to talk about these cool creative ideas. I started realizing there that I think I have an interest for whatever that original thing was that I saw on screen in 1977. And I still didn't know where I would fit into all that. And so I just tried to stay open, and I tried to say yes to everything that came along, just hoping that it would just lead me to the next thing, which it did, and it does. And thank God I stayed open to that. Um,
That is so great, Mike. And so, you know what comes up for me? Was it more about getting the A's, or was it more about just finding that you found maybe what your passion might be as it related back to the Star Wars thing? Like, it just felt like a fit, which so many people are not finding in college or coming out of college. So to just feel like, oh, these are classes that are fitting with me.
it was the fit. I still don't care about grades. I really don't. I don't think it's a reflection of how talented somebody is or how creative somebody is. It's like, okay, you follow directions, you get an A. And we're like, all right, well, the best creative work doesn't necessarily come from following directions. So I don't know how that's going to serve you out in making, the next great masterpiece. But I shouldn't say that. But it's true,
But it's
like,
true.
you want to. I've always thought as a creative, like, I want to learn the rules so I know how to break them.
Oh, love that. So
Yeah.
what happened, Mike, when you got out of college? Take us
Um,
down that journey.
yep. I freelanced that first year. And by the way,
Freelancing to what?
I do want to say, like, my grades were so bad all the way up until that time that I did not get accepted to film school. I applied and I did not get accepted. I had to take a different route because at that point I did want to graduate. I took liberal studies with a broadcast management. I could take broadcast management, but I couldn't take any of the production classes because the program was impacted. I didn't have the grades. I applied twice. You can only apply twice. I just found another way. And that other way was through internships. And I just was like, I'm doing this with my life, and no college is going to tell me that I'm not. Like, this is my jam. So I just started going out. And this is back in the days of Yellow Pages. I'm now totally dating myself. And I opened it up to video, and I just started calling every company, asking them if they needed an intern. And I grew up in San Diego. I found one company that makes like those hotel videos, like when you stay in a hotel and you turn the TV on and it's like,
Yeah.
welcome to the Marriott. We have 7 restaurants and 4 swimming pools. So they made those, and they're like, kind of low budget, but they were super cool. And they said, come on in, let's talk. And so I got an internship with them. And the guy who ran the video production group for them, just the nicest, kindest, coolest guy. And he kind of became one of my first mentors and just showed me so much and taught me so much. And in return, I tried to be there for him, show up on time, work hard. And in return, he taught me an awful lot. And of course, as life has it, he was very well connected in LA. And so when after a while, he's like, you need to go spread your wings. And he made some phone calls on my behalf, which led me to another internship in LA. And I moved to LA and I slept on my friend's floor, like so many people do when they first moved to LA. And I spent a year in a sleeping bag on my friend's floor, but I was here, and
Wow.
that was in the early 90s and I've been here ever since.
What internship was that the guy had, and did you ask him to recommend you? Did he just say you're ready to move on? Very intricate part, because so many kids that I work with are young adults. I don't want to ask. I don't want to bother them. I don't know if I'm good enough, the whole like imposter syndrome. What
Yeah.
made you feel at that time? How long did you work at that first company till you asked, or he just said to you? How did that go down for you? Because people
Yeah,
need
I
to
think that
know
was
them.
probably, I think I was there for about a year, maybe a
Okay.
year and a half
Yep.
interning. And I know, I had to prove myself first. And then, eventually after you build trust and you prove yourself, you're sitting around late at night or hanging out and they start asking you like, what do you want to do? And where do you see yourself? And then he was like, oh, I used to work at Entertainment Tonight, which was like a big deal back then. I don't know about now, but he was like, let me make some phone calls. So I went to Entertainment Tonight and I was working, and that was really cool. It was at the time they shot it on the Paramount lot. So it was like all I wanted to do was be a part of this business. And now I'm like walking onto the Paramount lot and I'm surrounded by like actors who are walking to their set that I totally recognize. And I'm, next door to us, they shot that show Cheers.
Oh
That
my
was
God.
that was on the set next door to Entertainment Tonight. And I would always just kind of walk over there and I kind of just became friendly with like the stage manager. And so on my lunch break, he would let me sit in the bleachers while they were all practicing and rehearsing their lines. And I'm like, this is so cool. Like I'm sitting and it's just like me and the bleachers and no one else. And I'm just sitting there eating my brown bag sandwich that I don't need money to even go buy the cafeteria. So
Mike,
it
how
was
old
really
were
cool.
you at that time? I love that story. I mean, I could just picture it. How old were you?
Yeah, I think I was about 25 or so,
Oh
20,
my
maybe
God. Did you
26.
think you hit like pay dirt, like at that
Oh yeah.
moment?
Oh, and the hours were brutal. Like I would get up at 4:30, I think, to get there by like 5:30 or 6 a.m. And then I would work till about 6 p.m. at night. And they were like, hey, it's like 3 o'clock. You can go home. I'm like, no, I love this. Like I would just go sit in the edit bay and just talk to the editors and ask them questions. And they're like, don't you have to leave or something? I'm like, no, man, I just want to be around this all the time.
That is so cool. So what was your job at Entertainment Tonight? I mean, that's iconic.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think it was in the tape vault, and I was like, an assistant to the editors, just like whatever, if they needed coffee or whatever, like it doesn't matter. You just got to get in there. And then, yeah, they offered me a more permanent job, but the weird thing is at this point I really wanted to graduate and I needed to just go back and do one more semester to graduate. And I
Oh,
was so conflicted
wow.
because they were offering me a decently paying job. And I'm like, oh my God, like, can you just wait a few more months? I just need to go knock out this one last semester. And I'm glad I did. I had come too far at that point, and it became a personal goal to get my diploma. I, it the diploma didn't really matter for my career. And I don't, I have mixed emotions about diploma. If it's a personal goal, I support it. Do you need a diploma to work in this industry? Absolutely not.
God, Mike, it's crazy, but you think now if it had happened today or during COVID, you probably could have ended up doing both. Isn't that
Yeah,
ironic that you could have, for that one semester or one class, whatever you were taking, you could probably have taken it online and worked at the same time.
yeah,
Isn't it? That's so interesting how life has changed for so many of us and so many people seeking jobs now. Crazy. So
yeah.
you did that. And then where did you go? Or you went back to school, got your
I
diploma.
finished school, yep, and then, and that was the year after school. I had done enough, like, internships at this point and met enough people, and I'm not saying that I met a ton of people, but enough where that first year out of college, I was able to, just get PA jobs or coordinator jobs or just, little stints here and there, on commercials, on sports shoots, on TV shows, just like, I was hustling. I was just out there hustling like everybody does.
And
Um,
Mike, you bring up a really good point because, as I always say, it's all who you know sometimes, not what you know. So, what was your strategy? Were you just calling people that, hey, remember me on Entertainment Tonight? Hey, what would be your line that would get somebody to talk to you to say, yeah, we're doing a shoot or something? I mean, it's really important because a lot of people don't know how to do that today.
yeah, yep, you're so right. And I think networking is a dirty word. Like I'm not a fan of networking. And looking back on it, even when I was younger, I think I was always about connecting. And I
Mm.
would try to find some common ground that we could connect on. Networking to me just feels too transactional. It's like, hey, you got anything for me? Or like it just, I don't know. And like if I could just build relationships and connections, then I could just like, hey, how have you been? What are you up to these days? Want to grab a coffee? I would ask them about what they're doing. They would ask me what I'm doing. And then I'd be like, well, I'm actually kind of free right now. I don't have anything going on. They're like, oh, actually, we need a guy like you. Can you come? And I'm like, oh, that would be amazing. So I I pursue a more organic approach to it. To me, it's more authentic. And it just, I don't know, I've never been one of those types of people to like hustle around a party and just collect business cards and or hammering people on LinkedIn. I'll go attend a panel and then afterwards approach somebody on the panel and almost like the way you and I actually met. Honestly, I met
Say,
you on a panel and I sent you a note afterwards because I truly was moved by what you had to say, and here we are, still
and here
friends.
we are.
So I mean there's no shortage of panels now. Go to one, reach out to somebody if they've moved you in some way, and I don't
Exactly.
know.
So you were doing all these PA jobs and whatever. Were you just trying to see where you fit in the entertainment bit? Like if you wanted to go into film or whatever, was that sort of the thought at that time, or you were just going where the
I'd
job
love to
was?
say I had some big plan, but I didn't. I just wanted to be around it. And again, I think when we're younger, we don't necessarily intellectualize these things. It wasn't until years later that I could understand what was happening. But at the time, I just knew I wanted to be around it. And I didn't care if I was carrying sandbags or C-stands or if I was holding up a boom mic for 10 hours. I didn't care. I didn't care if I was getting coffee. Um,
That is
I
being in the flow. That
I
is
just
when
wanted to be around it.
everything else just fades away and whatever it is you're doing at that moment, you're in your flow. I love
Yeah.
that. Then what
And
happened
my
after that?
Well, it's funny because you just mentioned about like knowing people.
Mhm.
I guess you could say my big break, if you want to call it that, was happened to come from somebody that I befriended in a class that I took in college. It was an audio production class, and he and I sat together, and he and I became friends. He moved to LA before I did, and he's the one who let me sleep on his floor for a year. And
Amazing.
he was in LA knocking on doors, hustling. I would come visit him when I had the money or time. Um, but he helped somebody build a couple recording studios. One of the recording studios was for an animation house, and when the studio was built, they ended up hiring him to work nights because they needed a night person. And he called me up, and this was right in the first early days of Pro Tools, audio editing and mixing and recording, when audio was just going digital. And he would just tell me these stories over the phone about how amazing this program is. And he's like, this is the future, man. You got to come and learn this because this is going to revolutionize everything. So I would drive to LA. I would sleep on his floor. When he would go to work at 7 p.m. at night, he'd let me tag along, and I would just hang out in the editing room with him all night long. And I would just read the manual, and I taught myself Pro Tools. And at the time, Pro Tools was a super expensive software. Like it was, I don't know, 20,000, 50,000. It was expensive, and not a lot of studios had it yet. So to like sit there in the middle of the night and like be able to even play with it would be unheard of. So, and of course, eventually that studio got so busy that they needed to hire another night person. And my friend was able to say, hey, I know somebody who knows Pro Tools. Because again, it was early days, not everybody knew it. And I went and interviewed and I got the job. And so he and I were the night shift for Nickelodeon's first animation studio, which was Klasky Chupo. And we ended up doing all the sound for all the early Rugrats stuff.
Oh
And
my,
all that's, yeah, that stuff took off. It was like Wild Thornberries, As Told by Ginger, Rugrats, Duckman, Rocket Power, on and on and on. I spent 5 years there. After the first 6 or 8 months, I moved to the day shift, but I worked there full time for 5 years.
was
And
it the best time of your life?
I don't, it was really fun. I got to, I worked my way up to dialogue editing, and I got to do all the ADR recording. So I was in the booth with all the actors doing all the voices. And on those days, I would just laugh so hard. They were so funny. It's so crazy. And like those recording sessions with the Rugrats crew, they were just like some of the best memories, because it was literally like 8 hours of just like crying from laughter while
Oh,
working.
I have always wondered what that was like when you watch some of those like films by like Judd Apatow, what you
Yeah.
know, whatever, when you know the outtakes, they're just dying
Oh,
laughing. I'm like, what is it like to be in a writer's room or like a studio like that where you're just laughing or you know what off? How
laughing.
lucky were you to, and were you aware that Rugrats was taking off? Like, did you know you were working on something really big at that time?
Not really. It's kind of funny
Really?
because I was like, well, I was really cool with my nieces and nephews, but
Oh,
like, but I was still young and I wanted to like make my mark in the industry. So like I'm in my 20s still, and I would go out to a nightclub and you'd meet somebody and they're like, oh, what do? You're like, I work on Rugrats. And they're like, bye. So,
and then when it became famous, you were like, they're trying
you're
to
like,
look
I
you
work on
up.
Rugrats. Yeah. So at the time, it was like, when I talked to my nieces and nephews, they're like, oh my God, Uncle Mike, tell us stories about working on Rugrats. So, but nobody else did.
Oh
So
my
it
God.
was,
And then what did you do after that?
well, so look, I've always been one to like, try to master what it is that I'm being hired to do. And then it's maybe it's the way my brain works, is I start thinking about, well, what else can we do with this? And so at the time, the head of the studio, he was a big fan of music. And so he started a record label on the side. And so when we weren't using the recording studio to record animation, he would actually sign bands and bring bands in. And so that was kind of like, oh, this is a whole different use of Pro Tools. And it gave a chance. He was like, do you guys want to record this band? And I'm like, sure. I don't know how to record a band, but I'll learn, I'll try. Um, so that was happening, and I always loved music. And then around 1999, I had my really cheesy 14.4 dial-up modem, and I downloaded my first MP3 file. And it took like all day to download. But as soon as it downloaded and I double clicked on that file and I realized that you could share music over the internet, again, I'm dating myself, but I realized everything was going to change. I literally remember double clicking on that file, listening to it, going, oh my God, this is going to change the music industry.
Mhm.
And I thought about what I had been doing with digital recording and editing and mixing. And I thought about this digital file that I just downloaded, that I was literally jumping up out of my chair in my crappy apartment in Hermosa Beach. And I was like, I want to be a part of this. I don't know what this is. Again, like Star Wars.
Man.
I started researching companies that were doing it. Of course, Napster was huge at the time. The record labels were freaking out because all of a sudden they can't control how music is distributed anymore. There was one company at the time that was really trying to be the legitimate version of Napster, that was really trying to legitimize everything. And it was called mp3.com.
Oh, wow.
And on that website, the CEO, he had like a blog, which was kind of common in the early days of the internet. And he would kind of write down think he called it Michael's Minutes, and he would write down kind of like his thoughts about the music industry. And then he always tagged out like, tell me what you think. And he had his email address. I just started emailing that guy. And I emailed that guy for like 2 months. And I'm like, what you're doing is amazing. I totally get it. This is what I do. You're going to need people like me. Like, I don't know how I would fit into your world, but I totally see what you're doing and I want to be a part of it. And he got back to me. He actually wrote me back and he was like, and it was nice. It was like, oh, thanks so much. How kind of you. If you're ever in the area, come on by, I'll give you a tour. And I'm like, I'll be in the area Tuesday. And so I called in sick literally a few days later and I drove to their offices, which happened to be back down in San Diego. And he gave me a tour, which was incredible at the time that the CEO of a company would take his time out and give me a tour. And I was like, man, I don't know how I can be of service to you or this company, but like I'm in. And I'm like, I hope I'm not annoying you, but I would love to just be able to check in with you from time to time. And if you have an opening, and we kept in touch. And about 2 months later, he called me up and he's like, okay, come work for me. So
Unbelievable. You know what I love, Mike, what you just said? So many people go, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to be a nudge. I feel like I'm stalking them. But you did that. And then when you met him, because you got it happening, then you were saying, I hope that I didn't, instead of sitting in your head with your limiting beliefs, like this guy would never hire me, whatever. What perpetuates or what propels someone like you to just go for it like that? Is it loss of ego or just not feeling like you're good? Like, what makes you just go after what you want? Because it is shown time and time again, you're showing us that when you're doing that, it plays out and not letting it get discouraged, what propels you in your mind to do that?
I honestly, that's a great question. And the short answer is I don't know. But I will say, like, I never stopped to intellectualize it.
That's why.
I just cling to that excitement I felt when I was 11 years old and I saw Star Wars. And I cling to that and I hope it's enough. And sometimes it has been and sometimes it hasn't been, but I don't go there with an agenda. I'm coming from the sheer excitement for what this person is doing and the sheer joy and that I see what they're doing and I want to be a part of it. And I haven't even thought through how I could be a part of it. I'm like, I see you, I get it. It's so cool. Like I'll sweep the floors. I don't care. Whatever, however I can be a part of this. And I think, if I had to step outside myself, I think there is something infectious about that passion. I know when people have come to me, they're like, Mike, I see what you're doing. I'm like, oh, wow. Like it beats the hell out of working with the person that's just like grumpy when they show up for work. You get somebody who shows up on your doorstep who's just excited about what you're doing and they just want to be a part of it. Like, yes, hell yes. Get that person in here. Let's find them something to do.
I love it, Mike. Thank you for sharing that because I want people to really understand that their passion can propel them into their profession and we don't have to intellectualize it so much. In fact, that's the freaking killer of all killers when we get in our head. I love that. So he hired you. You must have been flipping out.
Oh my God. I worked harder at that job than probably any other job. Like I was there 20 hours a day for 3 years.
Oh my
and
God.
I loved it. And I loved it. And it was my dream job. And we went public at the time when all the .coms were going public. I was a multi-millionaire on paper. And then we got sued into oblivion by the record labels and shut down. So it was the highest of highs and it was the lowest of lows. And I loved every second of it. And
what happened after that?
And
Unbelievable.
it's so funny because I subscribe to Spotify. I love Spotify. I use it every day. But we built Spotify in 1999, and the record label shut us down for it. And so every time I use
You
Spotify,
literally had created Spotify?
not specifically Spotify, but we built our own app to create playlists, listen to the world's music, to personalize it and make recommendations. And that's what we were doing. We were helping people find new music. and it freaked the record labels out.
I
We
remember
were
that.
light years ahead of what they had a dying business model, and they did not want to change it. Um, and that is
That
the story of the music industry, honestly. So
so
it's
do you feel like Spotify took that model? Because things had
um
changed and could do that?
I'm not going to point a finger at Spotify. Like I think other companies have come and gone and tried and
Mhm.
failed, you know.
Yeah,
And so I think Spotify, they're the ones who made it work, you know, and props to them. I love it. It's the one app I will never cancel. I will
me
cancel
too.
Netflix or I cancel Spotify. I think it's honestly too, like speaking of streaming apps, it's the best recommendation engine of any streaming app I own. I don't think Netflix gets it right or Hulu or Disney Plus. But when Spotify recommends something to me, they're usually on right. Like I go, well, that's pretty good. Nice job, Spotify. You know me well.
Amazing. So after this company, what did you do? And what, so were you starting to see like all this newness happening that you wanted to be a part of, or it just seems
Yeah.
like really saw things uncovering, were able to see the kind of future before most people did.
At the time, I had to, you know, lick my wounds a little bit. There was there was a few months there where it was just like, oh man, my dream job's gone. Like what now? Like
Mm.
there's nowhere to go but down, but that's not true. I started to realize what I loved about it. What I loved was being creative with technology, and uh, and
Mm.
and that it really represented new ways to connect with audiences. And then I started looking around the landscape to see, like, well, is anybody else doing that? And I really tried to remove any preconceived notions of what that would look like. And at the time, video games were really getting into that. They were
Uh-huh.
really trying to create these immersive experiences. Um, and so I started reaching out to video game companies. And I came really close to being hired by Sony, but that didn't work out. But I just kept talking to it. I ended up getting hired by Electronic Arts, and doing sound design for video games for Electronic Arts.
Mm.
And I learned in that year and a half that I like playing video games, but I don't like working on them. But they are, and I think video game companies are still aspiring to make the most immersive experiences they can.
Yeah.
Um, and so what
So was
I
that the trend that you were feeling, is to make experiential experiences? Like that's where the entertainment industry was kind of going and how you could be a part of that?
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of surf my way through my career a little bit. And again, going back to 1977, to me, it's always been about connection with audience, that
Uh-huh.
entertainment, and I try to remove the judgment or barriers of what that might look like. And I try to say, if I want to work in the industry that connects with audiences, then I have to be okay with platforms evolving, technologies evolving, you know, just because somebody's into video games versus TikTok, like they're kind of doing the same thing. They're creating that connection. And so over my career, I became more curious, and it's probably what led me into producing. What is that spark? What is that particle where that connection takes place, whether it's in music or social media or TV or film or whatever the medium is? There is a moment where that connects with an audience.
Oh, I love
And I have tried to become a student of what that moment is, and how to kind of cultivate that in whatever medium I'm working in. So when I was doing sound design at Electronic Arts, what I didn't love about video games is that every time I created some sounds, I had to work with a programmer to integrate those into the gaming experience. I felt removed from
that.
that particle moment
Yeah, from
because there
that
were
it goes, "Ugh."
programmers between me and that. Yeah. And some
Yeah,
people love it and they're great at it, and that's amazing. And programmers are their own artists. I truly believe that. For me, I felt very removed, and I couldn't reconcile that. So I kind of returned back to video, and I started shooting on the sides on weekends and nights, and I started just building up a new reel, and I used that reel to start going out and getting video jobs, and eventually that led me to CBS.
Mm. And what
So I
was
left
going on at
on a good.
CBS at the time?
Well, it's interesting because uh, I'll tell you a really interesting story about, I don't want to say networking, about connecting, but the guy who got my resume at CBS and ultimately called me up and interviewed me, we had a great conversation. We had a great interview. At the end, he said, "Hey, let me ask you something." And he said, "Were you in New York about 7 or 8 years ago?" And I was like, "Well, my wife at the time, she lived in New York, and I would go there when we were dating." And he was like, "Yeah, I remember you. We shared a cab from the airport into the city." And he goes, "You were working on Rugrats back then, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, we talked about that." And I was like, "Oh my God, I really hope I was cool to you." He goes, "No, it was a really fun and great conversation." And he goes, "And I didn't really put the name to the face until I was just seeing your resume and we were talking." He's like, "We shared a cab together like 8 years ago." And so be nice to
Oh
everybody.
my God. And you know
That
what that
1 hour
just
cab
shows?
ride 8 years later got me a job at CBS. Yeah.
Who paid for the cab? Just kidding.
I think we split it. Yeah.
Mike, you know what I love about that story is that is another thing is being memorable, right?
Yeah.
Whether you're in a cab, whether you're on a horseback, whether you're in a carriage, like
Well,
whatever,
look,
make yourself memorable. And you did.
I-
Kudos
I'll
to you.
I'll take it a step further. What was memorable about that was he had a friend who was a composer and wanted to start creating music for animation. And he asked if I would be willing to have a phone call with this friend and pass along his work, which I did. I did have some phone calls with his friend. He was really talented and great, and I passed his work on. He didn't end up getting hired at our studio, but he did get a job, and he was very grateful that I did that for his longtime friend.
For
And
sure. Because
and
again, it's all about connections.
it's about connections, and we are all in this together. So let's help each other out where we can. And that was a moment where it came back to me. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. I don't keep track, I don't keep score. If I can help somebody, I help them. If I can't, then I try to help point the way. But
That's
yeah.
amazing. So what were you doing at CBS?
So at the time, they wanted more video shot and edited for their website, and their website was pretty bad at the time.
I bet.
Um, and I had this tech background, kind of like I had this weird background of like editing, recording, mixing, video, like, but I also worked at like MP3, which was a startup and very like super high tech, and Electronic Arts, which was very high tech. And then I go to like, I like to call CBS your grandparents' network, this like
Yeah.
old network that was trying to embrace the digital age. And
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh wow, we could do this, we could do this, we could," and they just don't think like that because they just hadn't been in the digital space yet. And I had just spent the last several years at MP3 and Electronic Arts totally in the digital space. Um, so I started shooting and editing videos for their website, for their interviewing actors and red carpet stuff. And ultimately,
Wow.
it led to me talking them into their first live stream. So we did their first ever live stream.
With
And
what?
because
What was the live stream?
the live stream was the finale for America's Next Top Model. At the
Oh,
time,
wow.
well, at the time it was UPN, Paramount Network, which is now the CW, which was a joint venture, partially owned by CBS. And so at the time, CBS did all the digital stuff, the website and everything for America's Next Top Model. And at the time, it was like one of the most popular shows on the
Mm.
UPN network. And
But
and
you
the
did
finale,
other things there too. Like you did Victoria's Secret and
yeah. Yep, the Grammys was a
Grammys.
big one I worked on every year. And so it kind of all traces back to that first proof of concept. They were really freaked out about doing a live stream. And I was like, "No, I've done these before. Like you can do them. It's not going to cost $1 million." I think they gave me like $5,000 to do that first one for America's Next Top Model finale. And I called up the news division and I begged them to loan me a news van, which I can't believe they did, but they did, and they didn't charge me for it. And I'm like, "Okay, all I can do is ask. They can say no," but they're like, "Okay, but if there's a big story that goes down, we got to pull that van. It's going to have to leave. And I'm like, yeah, no problem, no problem. The whole night I was like, please, I hope a big story doesn't break. And I
Hurry
got
up,
lucky.
pick the model. She looks good. Let's
Yeah,
go. You know,
exactly. So we lucked
that's
out. There
so
was no big stories that night. And I got to use the van, and we did a whole live stream for the whole night. And then of course, everybody at the network's like, oh, we should do more of this. And then that led to more and bigger budgets. And then, now that eventually led to CBS All Access streaming platform, which is now Paramount Plus. And so, yeah.
wow. How long were
Origin
you at
story.
CBS?
I was there for about 12 years.
Wow. Where'd you go from there?
Well, it's interesting because I've been producing for a while now. And what I noticed, I started there shooting and editing,
Mhm.
but I kept being frustrated by the circumstances I was thrown into. I wouldn't have enough time to set up, maybe not enough time to light. And then I realized that nobody was really doing a good job setting up the circumstances, producing. And so I just was like, I knew what I needed because I was the one that shot it and edited it. So I'm like, well, give that to me. I'll do that too. And they're like, well, that's a lot of work. I'm like, yeah, but I'm tired of being put in situations where I can't do my best work. I'd rather take on more work than work as hard as I am and doing mediocre. Like, so they let me produce it. And then we started doing better work because I was a little bit more in control of the circumstances and I could have some influence over the outcome. And they're like, hey, that's working out pretty good. And I'm like, well, I don't have time anymore to actually shoot and edit. So we ended up hiring a shooter and an editor so I could focus on the producing.
Yeah.
And then as that stuff started to look good, we would get more requests, which means I had to hire more editors. So it ended up just kind of becoming a department, and we built a whole department with studios and edit bays. And then I got so busy running the department that I had to hire other producers to help produce. And so when we
At
would
this
do like,
point, what were you producing? Like, what were all the shows that you were producing?
yeah, Victoria's Secret fashion show stuff, we would go on location with Survivor. We would do Survivor
Oh,
finale. We would do Grammys, Tony Awards, Emmy Awards. Like we would do, we also started all the social media influencers, working with influencers. And then it became like, okay, we know we can functionally execute these things. Like, how do we do them to help the network grow or solve marketing problems or support the return of shows or the new fall lineup of shows or finales, maybe if we're like saying goodbye to like How I Met Your Mother. That's like how are we going to support that show? Because it was a super popular show with
super
fans.
popular.
And what are we going to do to kind of embrace those moments that we can create those connections with fans?
Wow, I love that. And so
Yeah.
after CBS, what did you end up doing?
After CBS, I left CBS in 2016. And that was at a time where there was so much content explosion happening.
Yeah.
Netflix was finally exploding. Hulu was starting to explode. Social media was exploding. And it was nothing against CBS. I felt like I had kind of been in that CBS sandbox for a while. And when I was looking at around the rest of the entertainment industry, and I was just seeing everything explode. And I was like, again, I want to be a part of that. And I don't know what that means, but I think I'm a pretty good producer. And I think there's a lot of people out there who need stuff made, and I want to work with them.
Love it.
And so I did. It's been a series of working with and consulting with different companies, and some big, some small. I just want to do cool stuff with cool people. And that's really my barometer now. And the other thing I don't want to say challenge myself because it's not much of a challenge, but I task myself with just waking up every day being curious.
Oh, I love that. Let me ask you a question, Mike, as we wrap up is, what would be a word of advice, because you're so good at that. I love your whole sensibility, to other people out there, young adults, maybe older, who want to switch careers, their purpose. Like, what do you feel is what it takes to follow your passion? Like, what expert advice in this field,
Oof.
what would you say?
Um, just here's the thing that I learned through the process at CBS, through 12 years at CBS, was that I thought I was a good editor. I thought I was a good sound mixer. I thought I was a good camera person. I think I'm a really great producer. And I think it's because I'm curious about what audiences respond to, because I still feel that 11-year-old inside of me that responded to Star Wars. I'm still passionate about creating those moments, regardless of what the platform or the technology is. And I always want to find new ways to connect with those audiences.
Mm,
It took all those different jobs and all those years for me to realize I'm really good at being the bridge between the people who have the money and the really great ideas. And how do we fit those two together and make them happen? Because we want to get paid for our art, but we want to make cool, creative things that are a little rebellious at the same time. Somebody has to be that middle person to reconcile that right brain and left brain stuff. And I never knew that about myself, probably until CBS, where I was in charge of a department and budgets, but I woke up every day being motivated by doing cool things, and that there needed to be somebody to help pitch those things.
mm,
So, all I have done throughout my life and my career has remained curious, gravitated towards the things that I were passionate for, even if I didn't know why. I don't force myself to try to intellectualize it. If it feels good and I'm excited by it, I'm probably going to get something out of it, and just keep going. And know that it's a jagged line. It's a jagged line. It's every cool creative person I've ever met has never led a life that is a straight line. And so
right.
I think it's okay to give yourself permission to try this or try that or zig and zag, and like you'll keep moving towards where you need to. Like I finally found my jam, and it wasn't until I was in my late 40s, early 50s,
Mm.
and it feels great. And I feel super aligned when I do that. And I'm just saying a bunch of words right now. I hope it's
No,
skirting
it's
your
such,
question.
no, it's fabulous. It's absolute, and it happens to be absolutely true. Mike, if somebody did, when you say about connections, if somebody wanted to connect with you and ask you a question or whatever of all the great things that you shared with us today, how could they do get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can email me at mike.myles@gmail.com.
And that's
MIKE
MYLES.
myles@gmail.com.
Perfect.
I'm
Mike,
happy to answer any questions. And, like I said, we're all in this together. And I am super jazzed by creative people, no matter how they choose to express that in the world. I think, it's a thing that kind of connects us all. Everybody that chooses that cool creative life. So, yeah.
I love it. I love it. Mike, I could listen to you for hours, your stories. I could just picture all of that. I just really appreciate you coming on today and sharing what it's like to be quintessentially a passionate professional. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
People reach
Deborah.
out, go after your dreams,
Oh,
and be passionate and never let anyone tell you you can't. Thank you,
yes.
Mike.
Thank you, Deborah. It's been an honor. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.